All right, Marine. Ready for a deep dive.
Let's do it.
Today we're tackling MCDP-1, the Marine Corps Doctrine on Warfighting.
That's right, the foundation for how Marines think about and fight.
Even though I haven't worn the uniform myself.
Right.
This MCDP-1, it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Oh, absolutely. It really gets into, the core of how the Marine Corps operates.
So where do we even begin? It's a pretty massive topic.
Well, MCDP-1, it starts by outlining the Marine Corps purpose.
Okay.
And it's surprisingly straightforward. The Marines exist to win battles and ultimately to win wars.
So when diplomacy fails,
Exactly.
Marines step in.
That's it. To achieve national objectives through military force.
But modern battlefields, I mean, they're nothing like the past, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And CDP-1 acknowledges that today's battlefields are incredibly complex and constantly changing.
Yeah, so much to keep track of.
You've got a mix of conventional and unconventional threats. Technology is constantly changing at a dizzying pace. And then the information environment. Forget about it.
So much chaos.
It's more chaotic than ever.
So Marines can't just rely on brute force anymore.
No, not at all.
They got to be adaptable, think on their feet,
Right.
be able to make decisions in the middle of all that.
And that's exactly where maneuver warfare comes in. MCDP-1 really emphasizes this idea of maneuver warfare as the Marine Corps' fundamental approach to fighting. But it's not just about moving units around on a map.
Right.
It's much more than that.
I've heard it described as like water flowing around obstacles.
Yeah.
You find the enemy's weak points and you exploit them rather than just trying to blast through them head on.
That's a perfect analogy. Imagine a river encountering a boulder. It doesn't just waste all its energy trying to move that boulder, does it?
No.
It flows around it, finding the path of least resistance. Maneuver warfare is about being that water. Flexible, adaptable, always looking for the most advantageous path to victory.
So how do Marines, how do they find those weaknesses? I mean, the enemy's not exactly going to give them a map. Right?
No, they're not. And that's why MCDP-1 talks about orienting on the enemy.
Orienting on the enemy.
This means going beyond just gathering intelligence.
Yeah.
It's about truly understanding the enemy.
Okay.
Their motivations, their tactics, their strengths and weaknesses.
Gotta get inside their heads.
You've got to. You have to see the battlefield through their eyes.
So basically, you have to realize the enemy's not just some faceless force out there.
Right.
They have their own goals, their own fears, their own ways of thinking.
And if you want to outmaneuver them,
Yeah.
you got to understand those things.
You can't assume they're going to act the way you would.
No.
Different cultures, different military doctrines.
Yeah, and different objectives even.
So you need to analyze them like a system.
Exactly. You identify those critical vulnerabilities and you target them. You disrupt their ability to fight effectively.
Okay. Now, this all sounds very cerebral,
Yeah.
very heady. Where does firepower fit into all of this?
Oh, firepower is still essential.
Yep.
But MCDP-1, it emphasizes that firepower isn't just about attrition, just wearing the enemy down through sheer volume of fire.
Right.
It's about using firepower in a much more strategic way.
Like selectively, decisively?
Yeah, to create chaos, to disrupt the enemy's cohesion. And then, you exploit the vulnerabilities that you create through maneuver.
So it's almost like you're using firepower like a scalpel rather than a sledgehammer.
Right, great way to put it.
You're using it to create opportunities,
Precisely.
not just to blow things up.
Yeah. So a well-placed artillery strike or a
Right.
perfectly timed air support mission, that can completely disrupt the enemy's plans, force them to react to you, and that gives you the initiative.
I'm starting to get a much clearer picture of maneuver warfare. It's about speed, agility, intelligence, all working together. But in this fast-paced, chaotic environment, how can Marines even, keep up? How can they make effective decisions?
And that's where the idea of decentralized command and control comes in.
Okay, so what is that?
It's about empowering leaders at every level to make decisions quickly without having to wait for orders from higher headquarters.
So trusting Marines at every level to make the right call.
Yes, but it's not blind trust. It's trust that's built on a shared understanding. MCDP-1, it talks about implicit communication, being able to understand each other's intentions without needing, lengthy explanations or detailed orders.
So it's kind of like a basketball team that's been playing together for years.
Exactly.
They can anticipate each other's moves,
They know what the other player's going to do.
and they react without needing the coach to tell them every single thing.
That's a perfect analogy. It comes from shared training, from
Right.
experience, and from that deep understanding of the mission. This shared understanding allows Marines to act decisively in even the most chaotic situations because they know that their actions are going to be in line with the overall plan with their commander's intent.
Okay, so we've got maneuver warfare as the big overarching approach.
Right.
And that focuses on orienting on the enemy, using firepower strategically, and then empowering Marines at all levels to make decisions.
That's it.
What else is MCDP-1, what else does it emphasize when it comes to winning battles?
Well, there's this crucial concept called shaping the action.
Shaping the action.
Yeah, it's about being proactive, about influencing the battlefield even before direct combat begins.
So you're setting the stage for victory before the first shot is fired.
Exactly. Think about it like a chess player. You
Yeah.
know, how they strategically position their pieces,
Right.
anticipating the opponent's moves,
Right, setting up the board.
trying to create
Yep.
favorable conditions for those future attacks.
So how would Marines, how would they shape the action? What would that look like?
Well, it could involve disrupting the enemy's logistics,
Yeah.
maybe using deception to mislead them about your intentions, or maneuvering your forces to control key terrain.
I see. So shaping the action is about being proactive,
Right.
thinking ahead,
Right.
creating opportunities while at the same time, limiting the enemy's options.
You're dictating the terms of the fight.
Okay. But things rarely go exactly according to plan, right? Especially in the heat of battle.
Oh, never.
How does MCDP-1 address that need to make, quick decisions when the unexpected happens?
Well, MCDT1 tackles that head on. It says that war is inherently time competitive, So making those timely decisions, absolutely essential.
But it also warns against indecision.
Yes. Emphasizing that making a decision, even if it's not perfect, is generally better than hesitating or waiting for more information.
So trusting your gut, relying on your training and experience.
Yes. Taking action, even when you're faced with a lot of uncertainty.
Almost like that saying, a good plan, violently executed now, is better than a perfect plan next week.
That's it. MCDP1 says speed and decisiveness. Those are often the deciding factors in battle.
So you got to seize the opportunity, react quickly,
Right.
keep the enemy off balance.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about understanding the enemy, the principles of maneuver warfare, the need for decentralized command, shaping the action, the importance of making timely decisions. What else does MCDP-1 emphasize when it comes to conducting war successfully?
Well, let's talk about mission tactics.
Okay.
MCDP-1 puts a lot of emphasis on this idea of empowering subordinates through what it calls mission tactics.
Let's break that down. What exactly are mission tactics?
So instead of giving really specific, detailed orders, mission tactics involve assigning a mission and trusting your Marines to figure out the best way to accomplish it.
So you give them the what and the why.
Yes. And you trust them to figure out the how.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you make sure everyone's on the same page, working towards the same goal if you're not giving them specific instructions?
That's where commander's intent comes into play. It's about communicating the why behind the mission, that overall strategic objective.
So you're giving your Marines context.
Exactly. You help them understand how their actions contribute to the bigger picture. The commander's intent provides that framework for decision-making. It allows Marines to adapt as needed, even when the situation changes drastically, because they understand the overarching goal.
Can you give me an example of how commander's intent might actually work?
Sure. Imagine a Marine unit is tasked with securing a bridge.
Okay.
The commander's intent might be phrased something like, secure the bridge to prevent enemy reinforcements from reaching the city.
So the Marines understand their primary mission is to prevent enemy reinforcements.
Yes.
The bridge is just one element of that.
Exactly. So even if the situation changes, maybe the bridge is heavily defended or it becomes impassable, the Marines can adapt their tactics. They don't have to wait for new orders.
Right, they understand the bigger picture.
They might find another way to block the enemy's advance because they understand the why behind their mission.
Okay, so this highlights the trust that's inherent in the Marine Corps.
Right. A lot of trust.
But with so much emphasis on this decentralized decision-making,
Right.
how do you make sure that everybody is working together effectively?
Well, that's where the main effort comes in.
Main effort.
MCDP1 talks about this a lot. It's about identifying and supporting the main effort, the action or unit that is absolutely critical to achieving victory.
So everyone understands what the priority is at that moment.
That's it. It's about focusing all your resources, your energy, where they'll have the greatest impact. But the main effort It's not static. It can shift as the situation changes.
So commanders need to constantly be assessing the situation,
Absolutely.
identifying opportunities,
Yeah.
adjusting the main effort,
That's it.
and then communicating that to everyone.
Absolutely. It requires flexibility, a keen understanding of how all the pieces fit together.
This all ties back to maneuver warfare again, right?
It all connects.
It's about constantly seeking out and exploiting advantages, adapting to the enemy's moves, and focusing your effort where it'll have the greatest impact.
Right. And to find those exploitable advantages, MCDP-1 talks about surfaces and gaps.
Surfaces and gaps.
Yeah. Think of surfaces as the enemy's strong points, areas of strength and concentration. And gaps are, well, they're the weaknesses,
The vulnerabilities.
the seams in their defenses.
Okay, so maneuver warfare is about identifying those gaps and exploiting them
Right.
while you avoid the surfaces.
Exactly. But these surfaces and gaps, they can be physical, like a, fortified position or a gap in their lines, or they can be more abstract.
Abstract like how?
Well, a gap could be a window of time when the enemy is vulnerable,
Okay,
or a breakdown in their communication,
right.
or a lack of coordination, maybe even a psychological weakness, like low morale.
So it's not just about looking at a map and finding weak points in the enemy's lines.
It's about understanding the enemy as a whole, their physical capabilities, their psychology, their leadership,
Okay.
their ability to adapt.
It's like, playing chess.
That's a good way to think about it.
You're trying to anticipate your opponent's moves, looking for those weaknesses.
But you got to be careful not to fall into traps, right?
Right, right. What looks like a gap might be a well-defended surface.
Exactly.
It's all about intelligence and critical thinking.
Marines can't just rely on brute force.
Right, got to be able to think strategically.
It's got to think strategically, analyze information, make sound judgments under pressure.
Okay, so we talked about understanding the enemy, identifying their surfaces and gaps, the need for maneuverability. What else does MCDP-1 highlight when it comes to, achieving victory in battle?
One of the most powerful concepts in MCDP-1 is this idea of combined arms.
All right, so what does that mean?
Combined arms is about integrating all the different elements of your military force.
So infantry, artillery, aviation.
Yes, logistics, all of it.
Working together.
To create a much greater effect than any one of those could do on their own. It's about using everything at your disposal in a coordinated and mutually supportive way, really to overwhelm the enemy.
So it's not just about having a lot of weapons, it's about using them all together in a smart way.
Exactly.
So that no matter what action the enemy takes,
They become more vulnerable.
they're vulnerable to another element of your force.
Exactly. Imagine you're trying to seize a heavily fortified position.
Okay.
You might use artillery, airstrikes to soften up their defenses. At the same time, you're sending in infantry and tanks to attack their front lines. And just when they think they've got you pinned down, you have helicopters air assaulting troops behind their lines,
Wow.
disrupting their command and control,
That's a lot to deal with.
preventing reinforcements from arriving.
It's like a multi-pronged attack.
Each element of your force plays a specific role, supporting the others, creating a multi-dimensional attack that really overwhelms the enemy. The enemy has to make choices.
Right.
And no matter what choice they make,
Yeah.
you're going to be exposed to another element of your combined arms team.
Wow. This has given me a whole new appreciation for just how complex modern warfare is,
It's a complex dance for sure,
but also how effective it can be.
when it's choreographed correctly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Maneuver warfare, decentralized command, shaping the action, surfaces and gaps, combined arms. It's pretty clear. MCDP-1 lays out a pretty comprehensive and nuanced approach to warfare
It does. It really boils down to fighting smarter, not harder.
and empowering Marines at all levels to think critically, adapt to changing circumstances,
That's it.
make decisions that'll lead to victory.
It's about being a thinking warrior, not just a mindless instrument of force.
So where do we go from here? What else can we unpack from MCDP-1 to help our listener understand maneuver warfare and how it applies to them as a Marine?
Well, let's talk about one of the most fundamental concepts in maneuver warfare, orienting on the enemy. We touched on this earlier, but it deserves a much deeper dive, especially in the context of all that friction,
The chaos of war.
that chaotic nature of war.
Okay, I'm ready.
Let's dive in. MCDP-1 is very clear. Initiative is absolutely the heart and soul of maneuver warfare. It's about dictating the terms of the battle, seizing opportunities, and acting decisively to keep the enemy constantly reacting to you.
So it's not just about reacting to the enemy.
Yeah.
It's about anticipating their moves, taking the fight to them,
That's it.
disrupting their plans before they can even fully form.
Precisely. Initiative is about being proactive, not reactive. It's about creating opportunities,
Yeah.
not waiting for them to just, magically appear. And this takes a certain mindset, a willingness to take calculated risks, to act boldly even when things are uncertain.
So initiative requires a balance, right?
Yes.
Between calculated risk and following orders.
Yeah.
How do you find that balance?
Yeah. That's where training and experience come in. And a deep understanding of the commander's intent. Remember we talked about mission tactics?
Yeah.
That reliance on subordinates exercising initiative.
Right.
Well, it only works within the framework of that intent.
Right. So it's not about going rogue or acting recklessly. It's about using your judgment to make the tough calls on the ground
Right.
and advancing the mission's objective.
You got it.
Mhm.
Now, remember those surfaces and gaps we discussed earlier?
Yeah, the enemy's strengths and weaknesses.
The enemy's strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
Well, being able to identify and exploit those gaps, that's key to seizing the initiative.
Okay, so let's go back to surfaces and gaps for a second.
Okay.
How does recognizing those things on the fly tie into this idea of taking initiative?
Okay, so think about it. You're out on patrol, and you spot a gap in the enemy's defenses. Or maybe you see a moment when their attention is diverted. A Marine who can recognize that opportunity
Right.
and act decisively can seize the initiative and potentially turn the tide of, a firefight
Right.
or even a larger operation.
So it's not just about having the knowledge.
No.
It's about being aware,
Being aware.
making the connection between what you know and what you see,
Yes.
and then having the guts to act on it.
Initiative is useless without action. It's about being that Marine who sees the opportunity and takes it, understanding that the enemy is also trying to do the same thing to you.
It sounds like it demands a ton of trust between commanders and their Marines.
Absolutely. Without a doubt, commanders need to trust their Marines to make the right call when they see that opening, and Marines need to trust that their commanders have their back when they take that initiative.
It goes both ways.
It's a two-way street, built on mutual respect and confidence.
This all circles back to that idea of decentralized command,
Exactly.
empowering leaders at every level.
It's all connected. Maneuver warfare, mission tactics, decentralized command, initiative, they all work together to create a fighting force that is adaptable, responsive, and able to really hit the enemy where it hurts.
This makes a lot of sense. But war is chaotic, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Things rarely go according to plan. So how does MCDP-1 address that challenge of operating in such a complex and unpredictable environment?
That's where the concept of friction comes in.
Friction. What do they mean by that?
Friction is basically anything and everything that can go wrong in war. Think about the fog of war, unexpected delays, miscommunications, equipment breakdowns,
Right.
all those little things that can completely derail even the best plan.
Turn a simple operation into a nightmare.
Exactly. MCDP-1 doesn't pretend that war is this neat and orderly affair. It embraces the chaos, and it emphasizes the importance of being able to adapt, to overcome, and even use those challenges to your advantage.
Okay, so that sounds like it takes a lot of mental toughness,
It does.
a lot of resilience.
Yeah.
How does MCDP-1 prepare Marines to deal with that?
It starts with fostering a certain mindset, one that embraces uncertainty and complexity. MCDP-1 encourages Marines to be comfortable operating in those really ambiguous situations, to think critically, to make decisions based on incomplete information.
So it's not just about physical training and tactical skills.
No, it's much more than that.
It's about being mentally prepared, being resilient, and being able to stay focused when everything is going crazy around you.
Exactly. And a lot of that comes from building really strong teams. Teams that communicate effectively, support each other, and solve problems together.
So adaptability, problem solving,
Essential.
key skills for any Marine.
They are, MCDP-1 says the enemy gets a vote. No plan survives first contact with the enemy intact. That's why it places such a high value on the ability to adapt, improvise, find creative solutions to those unexpected challenges.
This all seems to go back to that core concept of maneuver warfare again, doesn't it?
It does.
Always being flexible, always thinking on your feet, always ready to exploit an opportunity or counter a threat.
Maneuver warfare is about so much more than just moving units around on a map. It's a philosophy, a way of thinking that embraces change, uncertainty, and that constant need to adapt.
This has been a really insightful look at MCDP-1.
It's fascinating stuff.
We've covered a lot of ground, but I feel like I'm starting to really understand how deep and complex the Marine Corps approach to warfare is. It's not just about being tough or having the biggest guns,
It's about being smart.
It's about being smart, adaptable, mentally prepared for the challenges of modern combat.
Exactly. It's about being a thinking warrior, not just a mindless instrument of force.
So where do we go from here? What else can we unpack from MCDP-1 that will help our listener understand maneuver warfare and how it applies to their role as Marine?
Well, let's talk about one of the most fundamental concepts in maneuver warfare,
Hmm.
orienting on the enemy. We touched on this earlier, but it deserves a deeper dive, especially in the context of friction and,
Yeah.
the chaotic nature of war.
Okay, I'm ready. Take it away.
So orienting on the enemy, it's about way more than just gathering intelligence. It's about truly understanding your adversary, what
Yeah.
makes them tick,
Right.
their motivations, tactics, strengths, and weaknesses. It's about getting inside their heads, seeing the battlefield from their perspective.
So it's about recognizing that the enemy is not just some faceless force out there,
Yeah.
but a thinking, reacting opponent
A thinking opponent.
with their own goals and fears and ways of thinking.
Exactly. And that's really important in a chaotic and unpredictable environment, where friction is everywhere.
Right.
When you can anticipate those potential threats and adapt your plans and make decisions that exploit the enemy's vulnerabilities, even when those vulnerabilities aren't so obvious, that gives you a huge advantage.
That takes a lot of situational awareness, doesn't it?
It does.
You got to be able to process information quickly, recognize patterns, make sense of a constantly changing environment, and all under pressure.
It's not easy. Orienting on the enemy isn't just about collecting information. It's about analyzing that information, connecting the dots, and developing a really deep understanding of what the enemy wants to do,
Right.
what they're capable of. It's about asking questions like, why are they deploying their forces this way?
Oh, yeah.
What are they trying to achieve? What are their limitations?
Right.
And how can we use those limitations to achieve our goals?
It sounds incredibly challenging, especially in the heat of battle, when stress levels are high and information is often incomplete or even unreliable. How does MCDP-1 help Marines develop those critical skills?
Well, MCDP-1 acknowledges this reality, It stresses the importance of developing those mental agility and analytical skills, not just physical strength and tactical proficiency. It emphasizes critical thinking, rapid assessment, and sound judgment, even under pressure.
So training your mind is just as important as training your body.
Absolutely. War is as much a mental battle as it is a physical one.
Okay, so we've talked about understanding the enemy, embracing uncertainty, and developing that mental resilience.
Yeah.
What other tools does MCDT-1 provide to help Marines navigate the chaos of war?
Let's go back to commander's intent for a second. Remember, it's the why behind the mission, the overarching goal that guides every action. It's so valuable in a chaotic environment where communication can be difficult, plans can change in an instant.
Right, it gives you that context for decision-making when the situation on the ground changes,
Exactly.
and the original plan just isn't going to work anymore.
A clear understanding of the commander's intent. It's like having a compass,
Right.
It keeps everyone pointed in the right direction, even when things get really rough.
This highlights the importance of clear communication, doesn't it?
It does. If Marines don't understand the commander's intent, they can't effectively exercise initiative or adapt to those changing circumstances. They might even end up working against each other without realizing it. MCDP-1 stresses simple, direct language that everyone can understand. It's about cutting through all the noise, getting right to the why of the mission.
Like a shared mental model.
Yes, a common understanding of what we're trying to do and why it matters.
Hmm.
It's also about having a culture of, open communication, where Marines feel comfortable asking questions, seeking clarification, and even challenging assumptions when it's necessary.
Right, because in a complex environment, nobody has all the answers.
Exactly. The best decisions often come from, collaborative problem solving and an open dialogue.
So besides commander's intent, what else helps Marines in a chaotic environment?
MCDP-1 talks about main effort. Remember, that's the focal point of a unit's combat power. It's the action, or the unit that's most critical to winning at any given moment. In a chaotic environment, identifying and supporting the main effort is essential.
It helps keep everyone focused, right?
Yes, it helps achieve decisive results.
It's about prioritizing, recognizing that you can't do everything at once. You focus your resources and your energy where it'll have the biggest impact.
Exactly. It's about making tough choices and concentrating your tower on the objective that matters most at that specific time.
But in a fluid, unpredictable environment, how do you even figure out what the main effort is? What if the situation changes and another objective becomes more important?
That's where adaptability and flexibility come into play. The main effort isn't static. It can, and often does, shift as the situation changes.
So commanders have to constantly be assessing the battlefield,
Yes, looking for opportunities, identifying threats.
adjusting the main effort, and then communicating that to everyone.
You got it. It requires a dynamic understanding of the battle space,
Right.
clear communication, and a shared understanding of the ultimate goals of the mission.
So like in basketball, the point guard might call a different play based on how the defense is reacting. The main effort can shift,
Right.
but everyone on the team have to be aware of that shift and adjust.
That's a great analogy.
Mhm.
Now, let's bring back the concept of initiative. Remember, this is especially important in chaotic environments.
Okay, so how does initiative specifically relate to operating in a chaotic, unpredictable environment?
Well, in chaos, you can't always wait for orders from above, you know? You have to be able to act decisively, seize those opportunities that appear,
Right.
adapt on the fly.
So it's about empowering Marines at all levels
Yeah.
to make decisions and take action without always having to get permission.
Initiative is about being proactive, not reactive. It's about shaping the battlefield, disrupting the enemy, creating opportunities for success.
But how do you make sure that everyone's individual initiative is actually aligned with the mission?
Especially in a chaotic environment where things can get really fragmented
Yeah.
and uncoordinated.
Right. How do you make sure everyone's going in the same direction?
That's where the commander's intent, once again, provides that guiding framework. If Marines understand the why behind the mission,
Right.
they can exercise initiative in ways that support the mission, even when they're operating on their own.
So it's a delicate balance, isn't it?
It is.
Between giving Marines the freedom to act,
Yes.
but also making sure they're all working towards the same goal.
It's finding that sweet spot between control and freedom, between centralized direction and decentralized execution.
This all comes back to that trust that's built into the Marine Corps.
It does. Maneuver warfare really relies on trust. Trust between commanders and their Marines. Trust between peers and trust in the Marine Corps core values.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive.
We have.
Maneuver warfare, decentralized command, friction, commander's intent, main effort, and the importance of initiative. Any final thoughts from MCDP-1 that'll help our listener put it all together?
Remember, MCDP-1 emphasizes that war is a fundamentally human endeavor. It's about people, the Marines on your team, the civilians you're trying to protect, and even the enemy you're fighting against.
No.
It's messy, it's chaotic, and it often makes no sense.
So MCDP-1 is saying that it takes more than just tactical skills and physical strength to succeed in war.
A lot more. It takes emotional intelligence, it takes adaptability,
Yeah.
and a deep understanding of, the human element of conflict.
It's about being a thinking warrior,
Yeah.
a leader who can inspire and motivate others, a Marine who embodies the core values of honor, courage, and commitment. This has been a really incredible deep dive into MCDP-1. It's given me, and hopefully our listener, a much deeper appreciation for the complexity of modern warfare
Yeah.
and for the Marine Corps approach to dealing with that complexity.
It's really a testament to how the Marine Corps is always learning, adapting, and refining its doctrine to stay ahead of the curve, to meet those ever-changing challenges of the modern battlefield.
So, Marianne, as you go out there and put these principles into practice, remember that MCDP-1 isn't just some, rule book. It's a roadmap.
A framework.
It's a philosophy that can guide you both on and off the battlefield.
Think about how these concepts apply not just in combat, but in training, in planning, and in your everyday life. How can you be more proactive, more adaptable, more focused when you face challenges?
Yeah, how can you foster that culture of trust and initiative within your unit?
Keep asking those questions, Marine. Never stop learning, never stop adapting, and never stop pushing yourself to be the best Marine you can be.
Simplify.